The mockery. The observation deck of Stellaris Station offered the most breathtaking view in the known galaxy. Through its transparent aluminum walls, representatives could see the swirling nebula of the Helios cluster, where 3 young stars painted space in shades of blue and gold. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of the viewing platform, her reflection barely visible against the cosmic backdrop. She wore a simple black uniform with no visible rank insignia, just a small patch that read SOS, Special Operations Specialist. While the other Earth delegates mingled nervously with alien dignitaries, she remained still, watching and listening. The Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with activity as hundreds of species prepared for the military capability demonstration. The Krillians floated through the air on their natural anti-gravity organs, their translucent bodies pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that served as both communication and weapon. The Draconids stood proud with their scales that could withstand plasma fire, and claws that could tear through starship hull plating. The telepathic mindweavers sat in perfect synchronization, their thoughts linking to form a collective consciousness more powerful than any tactical computer. Ambassador James Crawford approached Sarah with 2 cups of synthetic coffee. He was a career diplomat who had spent the last decade preparing for this moment when humanity would finally prove itself worthy of full membership in the Galactic Coalition. His graying hair and tired eyes showed the stress of recent weeks. The presentation was about to begin, and Crawford's hands shook slightly as he handed Sarah her cup. "They're going to laugh at us," Crawford said quietly, watching a Krillian demonstrate how they could generate electromagnetic pulses strong enough to disable electronics within 100 meters. "Look at them. Every species here has something that makes them special. What do we have? Determination? Stubbornness?" Sarah took a sip of her coffee and continued observing. "Sometimes that's enough," she replied, her voice carrying an unusual calmness that Crawford found both reassuring and unsettling. The Coalition's supreme military coordinator, a towering Draconid named Velcaris, called the assembly to order. His voice boomed across the hall without any amplification, another natural advantage of his species. Each delegation would present their military capabilities and demonstrate why they deserved a place in the Coalition's defense forces. The presentations began with the Krillians, who showed holographic recordings of their warriors disabling entire fleets with coordinated EMP attacks. The Mindweavers demonstrated how a single squad could share sensory information instantly across battlefields, making ambushes impossible. The Thermians revealed their ability to survive in temperatures that would melt most metals, allowing them to fight in environments other species couldn't even approach. When Earth's turn came, Crawford walked to the center of the hall with as much dignity as he could muster. The holographic projectors activated, showing human soldiers in training. They rappelled from helicopters, practiced marksmanship, and worked through tactical scenarios. Compared to the previous demonstrations, it looked almost primitive. The first snickers came from the Krillian section. Zephon, their military attaché, floated forward with patterns of amusement, flickering across his translucent skin. "Are we to understand," Zephon said, his voice rippling with barely contained mirth, "that your species' greatest military achievement is learning to fall from heights without dying?" The laughter spread through the hall like wildfire. Crawford's face reddened as he tried to continue the presentation, showing special forces teams conducting operations in various environments. But each image only seemed to increase the aliens' amusement. They saw humans using night vision goggles and thermal imaging, technologies that many species considered antiquated compared to their natural abilities. Velcaris raised a scaled hand for silence, though his reptilian features showed clear disdain. "Ambassador Crawford, while we appreciate humanity's enthusiasm, it's clear that your species lacks the fundamental capabilities necessary for modern warfare. No natural weapons, no enhanced senses, no protective adaptations. You're asking us to accept soldiers who would need environmental suits just to survive on half the Coalition's worlds." A Mindweaver delegate, her elongated head pulsing with synaptic energy, added her thoughts directly into everyone's minds. "Our analysis shows human reaction times are 340 milliseconds slower than the galactic average. Your species cannot see in most light spectrums without assistance. You have no redundant organs, no natural armor, no ability to regenerate lost limbs. From a purely practical standpoint, human soldiers would be a liability in any serious conflict." Crawford tried to salvage the situation. Our special forces undergo years of training. They learn to adapt to any situation, to think creatively, to overcome obstacles through intelligence and teamwork rather than raw ability. Training cannot overcome biological limitations, Belcaris declared with finality. The Coalition has decided. Earth's military forces will be assigned to Tier 4 support roles. Logistics, supply management, and garrison duty on peaceful worlds where combat is unlikely. This is for your own protection as much as ours. The delegation from Earth sat in stunned silence as the assembly moved on to other business. They had traveled dozens of light years to be told they were too weak, too primitive to fight alongside the galaxy's defenders. Sarah noticed how each alien species clustered with their own kind, how they all seemed to think in similar patterns despite their different physiologies. They had been at peace so long that their military doctrines had become rigid, predictable. Every species relied on their natural advantages so completely that they had forgotten how to fight without them. As the assembly concluded, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Ambassador Crawford looking defeated. "I'm sorry, Lieutenant. I know you and others like you have trained your whole lives for this opportunity. Maybe in a few generations with genetic modification, humanity might—" "With respect, Ambassador," Sarah interrupted gently, "I think we just received exactly the assignment we needed." Crawford looked confused, but before he could respond, alarms began wailing throughout the station. The main view screen activated, showing a Coalition fleet admiral whose face was pale with fear, something unheard of for the usually composed Thermian species. "Emergency broadcast to all Coalition forces. We are under attack by an unknown enemy. They call themselves the Shadow Collective. 3 of our border worlds have gone dark. No survivors, no footage, no explanation. All ships responding to the distress calls have disappeared. We need every available military unit to—" The transmission cut to static. The assembly hall erupted in chaos as representatives rushed to contact their home worlds. Belcaris roared for order, his natural authority bringing a momentary quiet. "All Tier 1 and Tier 2 forces are to report to their sectors immediately. Tier 3 will maintain defensive positions. Tier 4," he looked at the human delegation with what might have been pity, "will continue their assigned support duties." Sarah watched the panic spreading through the hall. These species had faced no real threat in centuries. Their entire military structure was built on the assumption that their natural advantages made them unbeatable. They were about to learn how wrong that assumption was. She touched the small device hidden in her collar, sending a coded message to Earth's Real Special Operations Command. The message was simple: Phase 1 complete. Proceeding to Phase 2. As chaos continued around her, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy had wanted to see what humans could do in a war. They were about to find out that humanity's greatest weapon had never been natural advantages or advanced technology. It was the ability to adapt, to learn, and to find victory in the most impossible situations. The Shadow Collective was about to receive a very human welcome to the war they had started. The Reckoning. 6 weeks after the Shadow Collective's first attack, the Coalition's mighty fleets were in ruins. The enemy struck without warning, disappeared without a trace, and left no survivors to tell their tale. In the emergency command center on Stellaris Station, the scene was one of barely controlled desperation. Belcaris stood before the tactical display, his scales dulled from exhaustion, watching as another red marker appeared on the map, signifying another lost world. "Report," he growled, though he already knew what he would hear. A Krillian officer, his bioluminescent patterns dim with fatigue, floated forward. "The pride of Krilla is gone, Supreme Coordinator. 300 of our finest EMP specialists were stationed there. The enemy somehow bypassed all our electromagnetic defenses. We found the bodies floating in space, frozen in their final moments. No signs of weapons fire, no damage to their natural organs. They just died." The Mindweaver Collective representative spoke through their chosen voice, a being whose head pulsed with increasing agitation. "Our shared consciousness cannot penetrate the Shadow Collective's defenses. When our warriors attempt to link with them psychically, they encounter only emptiness. Then our warriors vanish, severed from the collective instantly. We have lost 17 pods, over 1,000 minds silenced forever." Sarah stood in the corner of the command center, officially there as part of the human logistics team assigned to manage supply distribution. She had been watching the Coalition's failures with professional interest. Every tactic they tried was a variation of the same strategy: overwhelming force using their natural advantages. They couldn't conceive of an enemy that had found ways to neutralize those advantages. A new alarm sounded. The main screen showed a live transmission from the Shadow Collective for the first time. The figure that appeared was shrouded in adaptive camouflage that shifted constantly, making it impossible to determine their species or true form. When they spoke, the voice was artificially modulated, carrying no identifying characteristics. "Galactic Coalition," the figure said, "you have grown soft in your centuries of peace. Your reliance on natural gifts has made you predictable. We are the Shadow Collective, and we represent the future of warfare. Surrender now, and some of you may be permitted to serve. Resist and watch your mighty empire crumble world by world." The transmission ended before anyone could respond. Velkaris slammed his clawed fist into the command console, leaving deep gouges in the metal. Around the room, officers from dozen species argued about what to do next. Some wanted to retreat to core worlds. Others suggested desperate all-out attacks, but none had any real solution. Sarah stepped forward from her position in the corner. "Supreme Coordinator, I request permission to speak." Velkaris turned, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the human officer. "You are Tier 4 support staff. This is a military strategy meeting for combat personnel only. With respect, sir, your combat personnel are failing," Sarah said calmly. The room went silent, shocked at the human's audacity. "Every strategy you've tried relies on the same assumption, that your natural advantages will eventually overcome the enemy. But what if the Shadow Collective has studied those advantages and developed specific counters?" Zephon, the Krillian military attaché, flickered with indignation. "What could a human possibly know about advanced warfare? Your species can barely survive without mechanical assistance." Sarah walked to the tactical display, her movements deliberate and confident. "May I?" Without waiting for permission, she began manipulating the holographic interface. "Look at the pattern of attacks. They're not random. Each strike targets a specific species stronghold, but only after that species has revealed their latest defensive strategies. They're learning from you, adapting to every move you make." "Impossible," the Mindweaver representative interjected. "No species could adapt that quickly to so many different combat styles." "Unless," Sarah continued, "they're not relying on natural advantages at all. What if they're using pure tactics, technology, and psychological warfare? What if they're fighting the way humans have always had to fight, without natural gifts to fall back on?" Velkaris studied her with new interest. "You speak as if you have experience with this type of warfare." Sarah reached into her uniform and pulled out a different insignia, one that nobody in the room recognized. It showed a skull wearing a hood of shadows. "Special Operations Specialist Sarah Mitchell, Earth Strategic Operational Solutions. We call ourselves SOS for short, though the acronym has a double meaning. We've been preparing for this possibility since humanity first made contact with the Coalition." The room erupted in confused voices, but Sarah continued. "While you were laughing at our conventional forces, Earth's real military minds were studying every species in the Coalition. We developed contingency plans for fighting enemies who could neutralize natural advantages because we've never had any ourselves. Supreme Coordinator, I formally request permission to undertake a solo reconnaissance mission to gather intelligence on the Shadow Collective." Velkaris looked around the room at his demoralized officers. "One human against an enemy that has destroyed our finest warriors? This is madness. One human who has spent her entire life learning to fight enemies stronger, faster, and more naturally gifted than herself," Sarah corrected. "Give me a small stealth ship in 72 hours. If I don't return with actionable intelligence, you've lost nothing but a Tier 4 support officer." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah equipped herself not with advanced Coalition technology, but with simple, reliable human gear. Traditional projectile weapons with subsonic ammunition, chemical-based camouflage that wouldn't trigger energy sensors, and most importantly, a trained mind that had learned to think in patterns her enemies wouldn't expect. She piloted the stealth ship to the last known position of a Shadow Collective attack, then powered down all systems except basic life support. For 12 hours she floated in the debris field, watching and waiting with a patience that would have driven most Coalition species to madness. Then she saw it, a slight distortion in space that most sensors would have missed. She had learned to trust her eyes over technology, a very human trait that the Coalition found primitive. Following the distortion at a distance, Sarah eventually found herself approaching an asteroid field that wasn't on any star chart. Hidden among the rocks was a massive station, clearly built from salvaged Coalition technology, but modified in ways that seemed impossible. She ditched her ship and approached on foot using magnetic boots and a personal thruster pack, equipment so basic that the station's sensors ignored it as debris. Inside the station, Sarah moved through corridors filled with shadows and strange angles. The Shadow Collective had designed their base to be psychologically disturbing, using optical illusions and acoustic dampening to disorient intruders. But Sarah had trained in sensory deprivation chambers and houses of mirrors. She found comfort in the confusion, using it as cover. In the central command center, she finally saw them. The Shadow Collective weren't a new species at all. They were an alliance of outcasts and failures from Coalition worlds, beings whose natural advantages were considered insufficient or defective. Led by a Krillian whose EMP organs had never developed, a Mindweaver severed from the collective, and a Draconid born without scales. They had learned to fight without their species' gifts and in doing so, had become more dangerous than their naturally advantaged kin. Sarah recorded everything, then began her escape. But as she moved through the corridors, she deliberately left signs of her passage. A human boot print here, a strand of hair there. She wanted them to know they had been infiltrated. Wanted them to feel the same fear they had instilled in the Coalition. On her way out, she planted small charges on critical systems. Nothing that would destroy the station, but enough to send a message. The explosion started just as her ship cleared the asteroid field. She broadcast on all Coalition emergency frequencies. "This is Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, Earth SOS. I have critical intelligence on the Shadow Collective. They are not invincible. They are not unknown. They are beings just like us who learn to fight without natural advantages. And if they can do it, humanity can do it better." Her return to Stellaris Station was met with a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. The intelligence she provided revealed not just the Shadow Collective's location and methods, but a fundamental truth the Coalition had forgotten. Victory in war didn't come from natural gifts or advanced technology alone. It came from adaptation, creativity, and the willingness to fight even when the odds seemed impossible. Belcaris stood before the assembled Coalition leadership, his pride warring with pragmatism. "Lieutenant Mitchell has proven that humanity possesses capabilities we failed to recognize. Effective immediately, Earth forces are promoted to Tier 1 combat status. More than that, we request that human special operations specialists train our forces in these unconventional tactics." The victory celebration on Stellaris Station was unlike any before. Species that had never interacted beyond formal meetings now shared stories of battles won through human tactics. The Mindweavers spoke of learning to fight as individuals, the Draconids of using stealth over strength, the Krillians of winning through patience rather than overwhelming force. Ambassador Crawford found Sarah standing once again at the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "You knew this would happen," he said. "You knew the Coalition would face an enemy like this." Sarah nodded slowly. "Humanity's greatest strength has never been what we have, Ambassador. It's what we've learned to do without." The Coalition needed to learn that lesson. They needed to understand that in the vast darkness of space, the most dangerous species isn't the one with the sharpest claws or the strongest armor. It's the one that can adapt, survive, and overcome any challenge. The Galactic Coalition had laughed at Earth's special forces, dismissed them as primitive and weak. But when faced with an enemy that fought with human tactics, they learned a fundamental truth about warfare and survival. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from having no advantages at all, because it forces you to become something more than what nature made you. It forces you to become unstoppable through will alone. From that day forward, human military advisors were stationed on every Coalition world, and Earth's special forces became the most requested units in the galaxy. Not because they were the strongest or fastest, but because they had mastered the most powerful weapon in existence, the ability to turn any weakness into strength, any disadvantage into victory. The galaxy had learned to never again underestimate the species that had no natural gifts except the refusal to give up.